Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Rocco here, and today I'm going to be talking about MW2, or Modern Warfare 2. Wait, hang on. Modern Warfare 2 2022. Whatever you want to call this chronologically confused game, and try to differentiate it from real Modern Warfare 2 from 2009, I'm going to be talking about this game. I just played the beta. I played all 4 days of the beta. And I do play a lot of Call of Duty games. I have over the years. I still play the older Call of Duty games as well as some of the newer ones. And so I think I have a pretty decent perspective on how I feel about this game, what my opinions are on this game, and maybe what they should do differently moving forward. But really, before I get started, let me just say that, first off, this is only the multiplayer. We don't get a chance to play the single player until, right before launch. But with that being said, I'm not much of a single player gamer as it is anyway, at least in Call of Duty. I know I play some single player games every now and then, but I do feel like the campaigns are pretty linear and short and just not really worth my time. But with that being said, I know a lot of people do play the campaigns in these games, and for the most part, Infinity Ward, as low as my opinion is of their multiplayer experiences, especially lately, their single player actually is of a pretty good quality. Modern Warfare 2019 was pretty good from what I saw, and I did hear that a lot of people enjoyed their Infinite Warfare campaign and Ghost campaign and so on and so forth, MW3. So I do have pretty good confidence that they're going to release a good campaign for this game, and the single player will probably have a lot in common with MW2, because let's face it, anybody who played this game, you know, there's just literally nothing in common with MW2 from 2009 in comparison with this game. And I don't even know why they're going after the comparison with MW2 when this game has nothing in common with it. Seriously, they talk about TF-141, I think they're called, or whatever. They don't even have that in the multiplayer. What is the Spec Gru and the Quartac? That wasn't in MW2 when I played back in the day. I think it's just a cheap nostalgia cash grab, as far as I'm concerned. And it's just a lazy effort to try to get more money. And I think that's going to be the theme moving forward, is that this is a very lazy effort. But I don't want to sound too ranty, I don't want to sound too complainy and just kind of rip on the game like a lot of influencers and streamers and YouTubers alike. So let's go into, 1, what the developers don't have control over, 2, what they've done right, before 3, I go into what I don't like about the game and why this is kind of an inexcusable product. So first off, before I go through all that, I just remembered I've only played Invasion and Ground War, so keep in mind that a lot of my observations are through matches like what you're going to see in this video. So this is Ground War. We've got 2 maps. Said is this one, and then Seraph Bay is the other one. And there is one more that they released. I believe it was called Santa Senya. It was on the US border. But they released that Saturday morning, my time, and then by Saturday evening they removed it from the map rotation permanently, because I guess as low as Infinity Ward has their standards on the quality of their maps, Santa Senya apparently did not clear even that. So just to give you an idea on how bad the maps are in this game. But with that being said, 6v6, I did watch a lot of streamers and YouTubers and a lot of old school Machinima Respawn alumni and so on and so forth. Their experiences pretty much mimic mine in the sense that they did not have very much fun at all. So just take for that what it's worth, and I'll let you know if 6v6 differs from Ground War. That'll happen with the level layout, but pretty much everything will apply. So what does this game have a problem with that Infinity Ward really doesn't have a control over? So it's two things. One, skill-based matchmaking. Let's get that out of the way right now. It's what everybody's been whining about, and I really don't want to go too much in detail on that because I'd rather make another video on that. There's a lot of confusion when it comes with skill-based matchmaking. To be honest, quite literally, I do feel like you need a math degree or a statistics degree to really understand what skill-based matchmaking and EOMM and whatever matchmaking algorithm that Activision uses for Call of Duty, blah, 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 blah. It's not something that Infinity Ward has control over. I believe it's all but confirmed that this is something that Activision has hoisted on all the developers that make Call of Duty. It's not their decision. No matter how much you stamp your feet into the ground and dig your fists into your hips and whine until the cows come home, and the developers listen to you, it doesn't matter. Bobby Kotick and Activision and maybe even Phil Spencer, they're going to have skill-based matchmaking in their game. It's just a fact of life. We're going to have to deal with it. And that's really the reason why I play Ground War, and really the reason why I play Invasion, is because it's just much more difficult to have a sweaty lobby in those two game types as opposed to 6v6. It's just easier to get a sweaty lobby with 11 players than it is with 63 players, right? So since I want a casual experience, that's why I play these game modes. But anything beyond like using a VPN and using a different Activision account and using a NetDuma or whatever you want to call it, this is probably the best way to have a casual experience, because that's what we're here for. We're here to have fun. And the other thing that's kind of outside of Infinity Ward's jurisdiction, but I think they have a little bit more responsibility over, the IW engine is here to stay. I think that's the real problem with Call of Duty. I'm going to rant and rave about it in a different video. Inevitably, I'm just gonna complain about it until the cows come home. It's the real problem that this series has always had since Black Ops 2, ever since Jason West and Vince Zampella left. None of the developers at any of the dev studios have really been able to maintain this game engine properly. So for example, Fortnite uses the Unreal Engine, Doom uses the id Tech engine, Doom 2016 used id Tech 6, Doom Eternal used id Tech 7, so on and so forth. You get the point. And this game uses the IW engine, and if you wonder why you deal with so many inconsistent gunfights, why you deal with instant death gunfights, one-frame gunfights, bad hit registration, it's because of the game engine. And I could rant about it for the next 2 hours because nobody really seems to complain about it except for me. It's the real problem that Call of Duty has. It's like buying a home. You can care about if you have a home theater system, you can care about if you have the fanciest kitchen around, but if you don't have a good foundation, then your house is going to collapse and fall apart. And it's the same thing with this. This game collapses and falls apart in the most basic of circumstances, in a 50-50 gunfight. Or even a gunfight in which you shoot into someone's back. But that's not the point of this video. You can already tell, I'm heated already. But Infinity Ward, as much as they have a hand in it, because they have not been able to maintain this game engine properly, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, none of them have the talent to be able to maintain it. It's just way too expensive to get a brand new game engine. It's way too expensive to share the profits with Epic and rent out or lease out the Unreal Engine 5. The IW engine is here to stay, and so I'd rather talk about things that could actually be changed. So before I go on with that, I've already been a bit ranty, so let's talk about what the game does well. This game does a couple things well, and I hate to be a smartass, but at least this game is better than Vanguard. At least this isn't the worst game in the series. Yes, that's true. By the way, I just walked past someone who looked like they were a teammate. Go back and look at that. There was a green dot above that man's head, and I just walked past him like he was my teammate when he was a blatant enemy. I'm sorry. We'll touch on that. But at least, even despite that, this game is better than Vanguard. Vanguard I consider to be the nadir of the series. It's by far the worst game I've ever played as a first-person shooter. I've played Rogue Warrior. At least I had fun with Rogue Warrior. Vanguard had nothing of value. And at least this game is better than Vanguard. So it does stop a succession and a pattern of Call of Duty games that somehow were worse than the last one, with the exception of Black Ops 4. Black Ops 4 was better than COD MW2, but again, I digress. Let's talk about this game. The weapon audio, no joke, is actually pretty good. So I am going to rail on Infinity Ward and how, and there's no other way to interpret it, they are a lazy development studio. Some of the stuff that they've done is just lazy. And despite this culture of zero accountability and this culture of laziness, it does feel like that whoever or whatever group of people worked on the actual weapon audio or the tank audio in this game deserves some credit. It seems like they put some actual effort into making me feel like I'm a badass when I shoot certain weapons, especially the FTAR, I think it is. It sounds meaty and beefy, and whenever I pull the trigger, it sounds like, especially if I have the suppressor off, of course, it feels like I'm gonna do some damage. And that's what you want out of a game like this. That's what Modern Warfare 2 in 2009 did really effectively. It's what other games did pretty decently, even Black Ops 1 with the FAMAS, for example. The FAL in Black Ops 1 deserves special mention. I feel like that sounds pretty good. But in general, a lot of the audio nowadays sounded pretty crappy, especially in Vanguard, especially in Cold War. But in this game, it sounds pretty good. I would prefer suppressors to sound more like suppressors. It does sound like that the suppressors aren't suppressed in this game, but that's kind of nitpicky a little bit. This game is really good when it comes to weapon audio, and it's a step in the right direction. So credit to whoever or whatever group of people that worked on that. And finally, voice comms. Voice comms are a good addition, especially since I did play Battlefield 2042. I do feel like that that game was pretty soulless. That game didn't have a community that you feel like you're playing with. And with this game, it's a double-edged sword because, yes, you're going to be dealing with some unscrupulous people with some vernacular that's not within the commitment to positivity that they should be signing up for. But at the end of the day, you can actually hear other players, right? And you get rage mics, so if you kill someone, sometimes you get to hear them complain, and that's fun. I like that. It gives a human element to a multiplayer game that I think should never be removed from multiplayer. And credit Infinity Ward and credit Treyarch too, and Sledgehammer for not removing it when there's this culture throughout the gaming industry to kind of gentrify and make everything feel soulless and plastic. They've done a good job of making this game feel plastic and soulless in other areas, but voice comms is not one of those, and I hope that other developers take note. So, with that being said, that's really all that I can think of that's actually good with this game.
Okay,
so let's go with what I have issues with. And first off, I'm gonna have a complaint that's specific to me being a mouse and keyboard user. You guys know where I'm going with this. Controller aim assist is just way too high. A lot has been talked about controller aim assist as well, especially on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. again, sorry. I meant Twitch. You name it, everybody's been complaining about it, or everybody's complaining about the complaints about controller aim assist because people like controller aim assist for reasons that I'll get into in a second. It's way too strong in this game. I'm not going to go into it too much. That's another video that I can make. There's so many different ways that I can make commentary videos. I should do more of this. But in general, controller aim assist is just way too high. Think about it. If you're a mouse and keyboard user, you're going to be losing every 50-50 gunfight because inevitably the recoil is just going to be off target, whereas controller users don't get any recoil, and in fact they get soft aimbot, and it's just not a fair gunfight. If you look at it objectively, it's not a fair gunfight at all. It needs to be toned down. It needs to be toned down to MW2 2009 Black Ops 1 levels of aim assist. Or I guess I should say pre-jetpack aim assist. Which I'll get into in a future video, I guess. But even if you're a controller user, think about it. There's two angles you can look at it. One, if you face another controller user, they have the same aimbot you do. So gunfights end up being random chance. And number two, if you do kill someone, it's the game playing for you. Is that really rewarding? I would argue not. But yeah, I do agree that aim assist needs to be a thing. I have played console first-person shooters. I have played on a controller. I have played games that use no controller aim assist. And they are not fun to play. You need controller aim assist when playing first-person shooters. I completely agree. But it can't be this high. And so I would argue that it needs to be adjusted, but I do see that as a selling point as well. It makes players feel like they're better than they really are, and if they feel like they're good in games, then they're going to spend more emotional investment into that game, and as a result, more money. So I think it's a selling point, and it's not going away anytime soon, but even then, I think a lot of these developers think that it's just perfectly okay, and it's not. So it definitely does need to be adjusted for the sake of game balance, but as we're going to find out, Infinity Ward doesn't really even care about game balance. So that is compounded by the fact that the time to kill is just way too fast. The damage values are just way too much. As opposed to Treyarch that realizes that, hey, you know what? The game engine isn't very good. You get a lot of perceived instant deaths. You know what? We're going to have 150 health with our players. That way they can actually react to getting shot at, especially since there's no such thing as aim punch or view kick anymore. So at least I was able to do pretty well in that. And there is still a skill gap that you have to actually aim at your opponent and land your shots. So if that's the train of thought that they used to bump up the 150 health in Black Ops 4 and Cold War, then hey, more power to Treyarch. I think they deserve a bit more credit than maybe I gave them in the past. Because this game feels like I'm playing a hardcore game mode. Even I have to hide in corners and camp stairwells and play boring. It feels like I'm playing hardcore. It really does. And I know that because Black Ops 1 still has tactical crouch, hardcore game modes. World at War has hardcore game modes still being played. And people play exactly the same in that as they do in MW 2022. It's just really boring. And the reason why people play like that is simple. They're too afraid that they're going to die immediately. And that they can't react to being shot at. Look, how can that guy react to that? Well, you know, we'll get into that in a second. But it's silly, especially with the mounting, especially with all the sight lines, right? It's inexcusable to add this time to kill because it just promotes camping. And ultimately, that's what Infinity Ward is catering to. They're catering to the Timmy No-Thumbs who really can't find themselves in the environment and really be able to react to anything that's in game. That guy had the temerity to move. He died immediately because this game's time to kill is just way too high. It feels like hardcore. And the more that you pay attention and the more that you watch me land these shots, the more that you're going to see that this does really feel like it's hardcore. Hardcore is the default in this game. And it just lowers the skill gap. But along with that too, the level design is a massive problem. So as I said, 6v6 is going to be different here, but the same problems really arise. There's just way too many sight lines. There's way too many nooks and crannies that people can hide in corners in the back of the map and sightline head glitch camp because they don't want to run and get caught from behind as well too, because Infinity Ward didn't really take very much care in designing their maps. And it's even worse in Ground War. To be fair, it's a little bit easier to move in 6v6, but in Ground War, this is just inexcusable. There's so many sightlines. Yeah, you know, you take into account 19 sightlines, but you forget about the 20th, and that's where the enemy's at, and you're dead. And especially when the visuals just really aren't good enough to be able to gauge where you're seeing in the environments. It's way too much. Look, how can that guy assess the threat when he's moving out there? He was just better off staying indoors and never moving out, because that's just what this game encourages. And you really don't have as much of a problem in the last map. The last map was called Said. But it's a real problem here because this map is just way too large. And I can't begin to think about Santa Senya, which was the map that was removed, because, like, how bad was that map? If they had to remove that when these other two maps are just not very good either. At least Said is okay because you could move around from flag to flag, or from point to point. But this map suffers from the same problems as Battlefield 2042. It's just too large, and you literally have to compete in a triathlon and complete that in order to actually get to action in this game. It's the same problem 2042 had, right? Aside from using the wingsuit and flying around everywhere, you're just trudging along with this lack of action for 1, 2, maybe even 3 minutes. Look. Yeah, I mean, he was in a pretty bad position, but at the same time, like, why? This map could have done with being pared down to a point where, you know, people felt comfortable moving around. Look at how large that map is. I'm dropping it in a completely different area. And what we're going to see later on is that the map is so large that if I have to respawn, it's really difficult to spawn on the point I want, and it's really difficult to spawn on a point that I can get back into the action easily, because, like, the map design is just terrible. It's also really confusing to navigate, especially indoors. Many times, maybe even during this video, you're going to see me just run into a bathroom and just run into a dead end, because that's just what they want. They love their doors, they love their bathrooms. I don't know why Infinity Ward is so fixated and focused on just this style of map design. I get it, you know, you want to have buildings, you want to have indoor buildings, but just these amount of rooms to hide in, it's too much. And you want to encourage map flow, and it's just not the way to do it. And I think that's where my complaints also correlate with 6v6, is that just the map flow is just too terrible. And this all combines with previous issues, such as, you know, the damage spiking, you know, the game engine not being very good, the controller aim assist being aimbody, the time to kill being too fast. Think about it. It just makes people afraid to move, and it just promotes camping. And that is one of the memes that I think that people are complaining about right now, and justifiably so. Nobody wants to sit in a corner all day. It's not fun. Infinity Ward might call it tactical, but it's not tactical. It's just boring. Apologies for that there. But I was just seeing my performance. The performance in this game isn't very good either. You can see I'm struggling to get 60 frames per second running OBS on this. and I was just checking that out. So just one of a litany of issues that this game has. Let's continue on. Menu UI is another thing that a lot of people complained about. Information was just really too hard to find. How to level up and how to unlock weapons and how to unlock weapon attachments and weapon variants. People wanted to use the Lockman sub, which was one of the meta weapons that people found in the beta, but they didn't know how to do that because you had to unlock the Lockman 762 or whatever, and then you had to unlock the 556, and you had to find this in the most cumbersome menu yet in the Call of Duty series. And I had to tell people how to do it, and even then you had this weapon tree that you pretty much have to have a background in mathematics to figure out. For me it was fine, and for some other people it's fine, but for a lot of people it's like, how do I do it? Well, you have to unlock by leveling up this weapon to level 13 to get this weapon to level 13, and then finally you get the Lockman sub. Oh, well, that's stupid. Yeah, it kind of is. And it goes even further because this was an issue that I think is just a huge oversight, and it shows that Infinity Ward never played the game during the beta. You can't mute racism in post-match, and even some of the during match, you can't mute racism, you can't mute certain people, hot mics, people who play like they're in a washing machine, so on and so forth. It's just really cumbersome to find in a menu post-match or in the menu outside the match, but even in post-match, when you're seeing the kill cams and all that stuff, your menu is disabled, so anybody can yell anything that they want. So as it turns out, shock and awe, people aren't committed to a positivity as much as you would expect them to, and you can't mute them. And that's a problem, and reporting them is even more difficult, because that menu is just so bad. And just navigating through everything and trying to get the right settings and finding them in the menus. I don't know why they keep trying to reinvent the wheel here. Just have a barracks, have a functional menu where you're able to just see where you want to adjust things, see where you want to block people, and just go from there. It doesn't have to be the world's craziest thing ever. I don't know. That's something that I think everybody really kind of complained about. And also, it's really tough to spawn on the correct place in Ground War. That's something specific with Ground War. But what you'll see sometimes is that it's just really difficult to spawn on a particular point because your teammates are on it, but they're in combat, and so like you literally can't spawn on where you want them to spawn on because it's just not a very well-designed UI. And it was very obviously focused on controller users because they could just look at me, select that. That's fine, but when things get cluttered, it becomes not so fine. So whoever made the UI, I think, should be fired. It's the same thing with Battlefield 2042. But also combined with the UI as well, look at this. It's really difficult to see who's a teammate and who's an enemy. Usually in the old days, especially with these modern Call of Duties, when the graphics kind of took a downturn, you were only able to really identify them using nameplates. And you can't even really see that. You have to rely on a blue dot above their head, and it kind of just fades into view, and even then it kind of blends in with the environment, because of course everything blends in with the environment because the graphics are terrible. It's just cumbersome, and it just goes to show you why there were so many people that were just shooting at each other. It was something that if you played the beta, you shot at your teammates shot at your teammates shot at you, enemies shot at each other. Nobody could tell who was a teammate and who was an enemy, who was friend and who was foe. And that was combined with the fact that you never really got a theme of who's on one team and who's on the other team. So in good games like Unreal Tournament 99 or Halo, you had red team versus blue team. Or even in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 or COD 4 or Black Ops 1, you had very obvious themes. Like you had Brazilians versus TF-141, or you had the Vietnamese versus the British, or whatever, and they would have certain character skins that were specific to those teams, and then you would be able to easily identify who was friend and foe. You would have to be an absolute moron to not know who was friend and foe at that point. But in this game, it's so ambiguous. And it is probably the best example that I can think of Infinity Ward not playing their own game and just being unbelievably lazy to a point where they don't even care about team play like that. I'm at a loss for words at how bad you have to be as a development studio to not even consider the most basic aspects of a game such as that. It's laughable. It's embarrassing. But also, there's no visual response to know when you're getting shot. There's no view kick or aim punch, because of course the community complained about that, but it provided a purpose. You knew when you were getting shot, and it also rewarded the person who landed the shots first. So there's that. Tracer shots are pretty tough to see. They're there, but they're pretty tough to see. And really, the gun shake when firing is just way too much. It's just silly how much your screen shakes. Like, look at this. It's so difficult for me to spawn into the action here. I have to compete in a triathlon to get to the action again. I'm going to have to spawn on B. So, fix this, Infinity Ward. But yeah, one of the main issues is that the teammate and enemy players, they're just too confusing to identify. And that's compounded by the fact that the audio balancing sucks. I did say that the audio itself is good. I can hear my footsteps unbelievably well. I can't hear my enemy footsteps. They sound like they're on Cloud 9, running with Night Slippers. I sound like a rhino that's running in the savannah. So, of course, people are not going to run, which means they're going to camp in corners. It just promotes the camping that much more. So, overall, my thoughts on the game in general is that it is a lazy game made by lazy people for lazy people. This is a game that if you didn't want to put any effort into playing the game and succeeding in some gunfights, you can do that by hiding in corners and head glitching and using controller aim assist and the whole 9 yards. But it's made by lazy people because they have literally forsaken the most basic attention to detail ever. I haven't even touched on like many of the things that I want to touch on, but this is all the footage that I really have, and I don't want to drone on more and more. This game is summarized by the last 2 clips here. These crashes were pretty frequent. The rage mics there. But I dealt with this a couple times right here. Look at this. This is inexcusable, Infinity Ward. Fix your game. Please. So, on that note, and on the next note, I think it's a proper way to send it off. Don't buy this game, people. It's just not a healthy game. It's a defective product. Please, if you like what you see, please let me know in the comments below. If you don't like what you see or hear, let me know in the comments below as well. And yeah, I think on this note, I'll leave it at that. So, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I typically play older Call of Duty games, and I do upload those. So, until next time, take care, everybody.